Hi, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The time is 4:24. Good afternoon, everyone. Stephanie, would you mind doing the roll call?
Sure. Ms. Buckingham,
Here.
Mr. Ennis, Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Jordan,
Here.
Dr. Meta,
Here.
Mr. Bianca. He's.
Tony, can you unmute? Just check and make sure you're here. You can say here.
I'm gonna give him a moment. I'm gonna kind of roll call and go back to him. Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Webb, I'm sorry.
Here.
Dr. Wilson, Ms. Washington, and Mr. Bianca. Tony, we need your camera on and for you to have your mic unmuted so you can participate.
Tony, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you turn your camera on for us?
Oh.
There we go.
All right. And you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we get started, I just want to remind you all of the rules. For committee members and members of the public attending in person, please raise your hand to speak and wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking. To help the meeting run smoothly, please keep side conversations to a minimum and comments related to the topic we are discussing. For those committee members who are attending virtually, remember you must be on camera and have your first and last name showing to be counted towards our quorum. Please keep microphones muted unless called upon by the chair. Electronically raise your hand to request to speak and wait to be called on by the chair. For attendees, electronically raise your hand to request to speak. Once recognized by the chair, your microphone will be turned on. After speaking, the microphone will be returned to you. Also, the Q&A is to only be used by those needing an ADA accommodation to participate in the meeting. Public comment will not be accepted via the Q&A, except for those individuals who requested the accommodation. As for order, committee members in person and virtually will be allowed to speak first. Public members in person will then be called on, followed by public participating virtually who have their hands raised. As with all hybrid meetings, it can be difficult to keep track of all of those wanting to speak in person and virtually. Please be patient. All comments and questions from committee members and the public may be limited should we run into time constraints. So please keep that in mind. Also, comments about a person's character will not be allowed. Finally, members of the public will have the opportunity to provide public comment before each vote and during designated public comment periods. Public members will be given one opportunity to speak for each agenda item and will be limited to 2 minutes. The chair may also use their discretion to determine if comments will be accepted outside of this. So next is the approval of the July meeting summary.
Sorry, it should say January, I just realized.
Okay.
I have to say July and then it says January right here.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since it's been July.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Everyone should have reviewed the January meeting summary, which is linked in the agenda that you received via email. There's also a copy in your committee packet. I need a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion that, approve.
I'll second.
Okay, cool, thanks. Now it's time to do a roll call vote. Stephanie, would you like to do the honors?
Sure. So a vote for yes is to accept the meeting summary, a vote for no is to not accept it. Ms. Bingham? Yes. Ms. Bingham, yes. Mr. Ennis? Ms. Gonzalez? Ms. Jordan?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan, yes. Dr. Meta?
Yes.
Dr. Meta, yes. Mr. Bianca?
Yes.
Mr. Bianca, yes. Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Taylor, yes. You have 5 yeses, so the motion passes.
Okay, cool. The
Oh my gosh. Yes. January.
the January meeting summary is passed by unanimous consent. For those who don't know, it's since the October meeting.
Have all of the meetings listed.
All of the months. Okay. Melissa Bayham, would you like to give us an LRS update?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Just have a couple of updates on pre-employment transition services, and then we'll be happy to take any questions or, about that or any other topic, concerning LRS. Last meeting, I gave an update on third-party cooperative arrangements. I don't have any new updates on those other than we are continuing to work with the school districts that have expressed interest in contracting with us to provide pre-employment transition services in their districts. We are working with at least 3 districts who have expressed it contracting with us. We did have an application period for our fee-for-service vendors who provide pre-employment transition services in the school districts that don't have third-party cooperative arrangements. We did an application process just to make sure that all of our vendors met certain requirements. And in particular, we paid a lot of attention during this application period to their curriculums. Because we wanted to make sure that the curriculums and the information that our students were being taught in these schools, in schools for pre-employment transition services is as consistent as possible. So as part of that application period, 27 vendors have been approved, 2 are still pending, and 5 vendors decided not to renew their applications. The majority of the vendors, they either had to have their curriculum approved by our program manager, program coordinator, or they had to select a nationally recognized curriculum. And the majority of our vendors did choose to use a curriculum called Attainment. So I'm glad for the word Attainment.
Okay.
So it's the name of the name of the curriculum. And I was kind of happy that it worked out that way, just because I want to make sure that there's consistency in the services that we are providing, because that was a concern of mine that there was a lot of inconsistency in what our students were seeing across the state. And the last update I'll give on pre-employment transition services is just, we are waiting on our final budget for the next state fiscal year to determine what our funding is going to look like for these services for the next school year. We are, we're getting to the point where we're exceeding that, we're exceeding the 15%. We're supposed to allot 15% of our federal allotment on these services, and we're starting to exceed that. So if we don't receive any additional state general funds, we'll have to scale back on the number of units that the students receive per school year, just to make sure that we fit within that budget, because if we exceed the 15%, then we're going into the 85%, which is really for vocational rehabilitation or the services for our adults with disabilities as they're seeking employment. So those are my updates that I had prepared, but would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions for her before we move on?
I have a question.
Emily?
So my question is gonna be like federally related, since there has been so many changes to the Department of Education. Can you just kind of talk to the committee about how those changes are gonna affect our services, and if you guys have heard anything from, I guess, the federal government about how your funding is gonna be structured, how your department is gonna be structured, and if there's any changes, can you just talk to the committee about that?
Right. So unfortunately, my response to that is they have not communicated with us. So we're, just to kind of let people know where we are under the Department of Education at the federal level, under the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and then under that, they call it OSERS, and under OSERS, we're under the Rehabilitation Services Administration. So we call it RSA. And so if they know things, they're not saying. Now, I can tell you, we have a national organization. There are lobbying organization called CSAVR, which is the Council for State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation. And so they did poll the VR directors to find out basically what our preference was. So if we were to be moved out of the Department of Education, it appears there's two places we could go. One document that we saw talked about certain programs going back to the department that were in prior. And so that would put us somewhere in HHS, Health and Human Services. But what the preference was with the VR directors, and just looking at where we are in terms of our federal law, which we're under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the preference would be for us to move to the Department of Labor. Because, you know, a lot of VR agencies have already moved at the state level to the Department of Labor, because if you look at the requirements of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, most of the programs other than vocational rehabilitation and adult education are in the Department of Labor, and we're required to be mandated partners of the American Job Centers. And so we're required to partner with the Department of Labor programs already. And so the consensus to that national lobbying group from the VR directors was to lobby for us to be moved to the Department of Labor. But in terms of messaging that we've actually received from the Department of Education, that would be none. I can tell you, so the commissioner, the commissioner, obviously when the administration changed, the commissioner, I don't know how that works, but they're automatically not appointed anymore. I don't know the official terminology for that. But then the deputy commissioner and the chief of vocational rehabilitation, they did, from my understanding, take the retirement incentive, and so they both have left. And so now there's the acting commissioner is Christopher Pope, who was over the data unit. So there's definitely been some definite changes just because of losing staff due to the retirement incentive. And the only other thing that I do know that's kind of interesting is, from what we know, all of the attorneys that usually work with our programs are no longer employed with the Department of Education. But that's all the information that I have.
Stephanie?
I have a question about, I know you said y'all were waiting on the information for your final budget, and right now it's looking like the 15% is going to, like, y'all are exceeding that 15%, is that correct? Of the full amount from the federal, I just wanna make sure that I have it.
Let me explain that a little bit better. So I'm gonna actually start somewhere, I'm gonna go there.
Okay.
Because it leads me to something that I forgot to tell y'all. So I know I've spoken to y'all before about how every state is allocated a certain amount of federal funds, and then you have to have the state general funds to draw those federal funds down. We did recently, I think last week, get our final grant award notification because from the third continuing resolution where we actually finally got all of the funds. And VR actually got a COLA, a cost of living adjustment. And so last federal fiscal year, Louisiana was allocated $64 million. And this federal fiscal year, Louisiana was actually allocated $72 million. Now, we usually return 40 to 50% of that because we don't have the state general funds to match that. So then I'll get to your question. So it goes by how much money you actually draw down. So last year, we actually drew down about $35 million. 15% of that $35 million has to be set aside for pre-employment transition services. You can exceed that. It's just given our financial situation, that takes funds away from what I call the full vocational rehabilitation program. So we try to keep our program within that 15% of that. So it's not like we exceed, it's not like we overspend a budget. It's just that 15% must be set aside and must be spent on pre-employment transition services, but you can exceed that and spend more than 15%.
I do have a follow-up on just for my clarity I know previously we talked about the third party arrangement.
Third party cooperative
Thank you.
arrangements.
Third party cooperative arrangement would, like, if, I know you're saying like it's okay that we're over, but does that have any effect on that 15%, or is that going more towards the other thing? Because I know you were saying that that's a way that y'all pull down those
Right.
funds. So
So the third party provide us additional match. So, and all of those funds, because those contracts are specifically for pre-employment transition services, they all do go towards the 15%. So you are increasing the federal amount that you're drawing down, but it's also increasing, it's increasing the bucket. It is increasing the bucket.
okay.
But what we've had to do recently, we've had to be a little bit more mindful when we're renewing contracts, that the school districts are not exceeding what we would think is reasonable in terms of that 15%.
So my last question on this, sorry. Since there was this cost of living adjustment and we know just on, I guess, over the years that Louisiana has only been able to pull down at least or about half. And if 15% of the, or about 15% can only be those pre-X kind of things and the money going towards that, then I'm just curious, because I don't know, how do you get the 85%? Like, how do you get that match for the road rehab?
So the state general funds that we receive, that 15% of pre-X is just part of the whole VR pot. So we're constantly drawing down federal funds from our state general funds. And then that all puts it in the vocational rehab budget. Pre-X is just a portion of the VR budget. It's just basically when we do our financial reporting, we have to show that 15% of our expenditures were spent on pre-employment transition services.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the reason that we can't, that we're only, like, we're leaving half of it on the table is that we don't have the state general funds to match. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. So we get approximately $8 million in state general funds, and for us to be fully funded with the 72 million, we would need approximately $19.5 million in matching funds.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was trying to work it all out.
It's complicated.
Jill?
Okay, so I didn't realize this, but when you were talking, you mentioned that y'all fall under the Department of Ed. How does that correlate?
Correlate to.
Like,
I don't know exactly what you're asking, but let me
I
tell you.
think you are,
But let me explain something to you that's weird.
okay,
So vocational rehab agencies are in different places in every state.
okay.
So in a lot now, they're with the Department of Labor, like Texas, for example, they're with the Texas Workforce Commission.
Right.
But then you go to other states and they might be under the Department of Education, they might be under the Department of Health and Human Services, and then to make it even more complicated, every state has different departments. Like some have departments called Labor and Economic Opportunity, like every state has their own kind of structure. And VR can be placed in wherever the state government decides to.
So y'all just fell under Department of Ed.
At the federal level, we are under the department.
Okay,
But at
that's-
yes. At the state level, the state decides where to put the VR program, because prior to 2010, we were with the Department of Social Services, and they moved us at the state level to the Department of Labor, the Louisiana Workforce Commission, but our funds come from the federal,
okay,
under the Department of Education.
alright. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time for the Louisiana Department of Education update. Meredith Jordan?
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and answer that same question.
I was gonna have the same question.
Yes.
Thank you.
So just to kind of give everyone an update on sort of what we're hearing from the federal Department of Ed, Office of Special Education Programs. We're kind of in the same boat as Melissa answered. So we are still waiting for our next IDA allocation. So remember last time I was here, we talked about our budget, proposed activities. We've also talked with Steve about that. We've done a lot of public engagement and getting input. But the current draft application that we have publicly posted for our public comment period is still in draft, and it's based on last year's dollar amount. So that's kind of what they recommended to us, and we do that every year, is to draft your application based on last year's dollar amount. We have no indication that our funding will be reduced. As of yet, we have no indication that anything's gonna happen to our funding, that there's gonna be a lesser IDA allocation to states this year. So we're just kind of rolling with the flow as normal, prepping to get at least the same dollar amount, as last year. I will say the full team that supports us in Louisiana, my state lead, he is still there. We got the same, notification that like the legal team has shifted and changed a lot at the federal level, but I still have the same Office of Special Education Programs state lead. We are still in contact. We are acting as normal. We're still submitting all of the required federal reporting, all of those required activities that we have always done. We are always doing them. In fact, we just had a meeting with our state lead just a couple of weeks ago. We are in what's called our clarification period for our big federal reporting that we do every year in February. There's a 2-week clarification period after they review everything. They can come back and ask questions. We submitted one of the best federal reports that we've ever submitted in the state, and we've talked a lot here about performance and things that we've seen across our state for students with disabilities. We had very few clarification questions, but it was nice to be able to get on, talk to our state lead, get any updates, and of course I asked then any update on our funding allocation, and he didn't have one yet. But I suspect that we should get those very soon, I hope. Unless they extend and give us additional time, our IDEA application is due May 20th or May 21st. So coming up quickly. So I'm hoping to get those dollar amounts soon. So that's kind of where we are. We are operating as normal. We have no indication that funding issues are going to happen for us, nothing like that. So with that, I have just a couple of updates for y'all, and I know the next item is a legislative one that might take some time if there's any interest in what's happening in the legislation around education and employment. So I definitely want us to have time to do that. We are right now really, really busy gearing up for our big teacher leader summit that's happening in June this year, where we will have at least 4,000 superintendents, leaders, educators, special educators, professionals, all gather in New Orleans. It's one of our biggest events to provide professional learning, capacity building, get everybody motivated and planning heading into the next school year. What are our priorities as a state? And so that's got us extremely busy right now prepping for that. We will have many, many, many sessions to support professionals that are supporting students with disabilities. We have a lot of behavior sessions. We have a lot of instructional best practice sessions. We have IEP sessions, just lots and lots of topics. So that anybody, any session, there's a lot of opportunity to get professional development on supporting students with disabilities next year. We are in the midst of a lot of end of the year collections for school systems. There's a lot of stuff that we do and require school systems at the end of the year. It's not like they're not busy enough at this time trying to close out schools. But y'all know this is the time that we're collecting those local SEEK reports that I know you all stay really attuned to. I'm collecting some gifted and talented literacy, some gifted literacy screening data right now. So a lot of stuff happening to close out the school year. We are kicking off a lot of new cohorts of support that we do annually, and I'll have those on my report we'll talk about tomorrow. So lots of stuff both ending out this school year and already planning and prepping for the summer and next school year, and what we will support moving into next school year. I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about two of our latest policy revisions. So we have finally touched every special education policy in Louisiana now with our 1508 update. It does not mean we are finished. It does not mean that if we get additional stakeholder input, even with session happening in some of the bills right now, there could be potential policy shifts that need to happen in early fall in response to any laws or legislation that happens. So we're not done, but I think it's a pretty big milestone for all of us. A lot of people around this table, our parents, families, stakeholders that have worked really hard on giving a lot of input and listening to and coalescing around all of our policies and really trying to make things better for our kids and for our families. So in March, BEPI approved revisions to Bulletin 1530. That is, we call that bulletin, our IEP handbook bulletin. It includes alternate assessment eligibility criteria. That is the piece that we updated there in March. We have worked with stakeholders, with People Appraisal since the fall, talking about this update and what we needed to shift and move to in our state. We've probably talked about this multiple times at SEEP, at least twice. SEEP endorsed those bulletin changes. We also talked with superintendents because it impacts our schools. It impacts our students taking Leap Connect assessment. All of those groups endorsed the changes. Betsy approved those revisions in March. So that bulletin is on notice of intent right now. It will be off later this summer, and those changes will impact starting next school year. So just to kind of back up and sort of recap, what is alternate assessment participation? Who sets those requirements? So the federal law sets the expectation in ESSA that 1% of your student population can take an alternate assessment, statewide standard assessment. So the vast majority, 99% of our kids are supposed to take regular LEAP. We're supposed to have 1% taking LEAP Connect. So that's our assessment for kids with the most significant cognitive disabilities. Every year since 2017, Louisiana has submitted a waiver from that federal requirement. When we started, the requirement started in 2015, 2017, they give you a couple of years to implement. In 2017, our state was at 1.5% participation, so still too high in the eyes of the feds and of the law. Our last waiver last year, which was denied, because we're going in the wrong direction, we were at 1.8% participation in LEAP Connect. So what that indicated to us, and we've had a lot of conversations with OSIP, it was not something that we had a choice in. We had to make a policy shift and really revisit the criteria and how we were making decisions. What was the bar that we had set to make sure that we only have students with the most significant cognitive disabilities taking an alternate assessment. So again, this criteria is going to go into effect next school year. So we won't see the impact of this in terms of our participation rate for another year. So it is likely I will submit another waiver this fall that will still show a participation rate too high because, right, it took us time to get the policy shift. And then by the time we get it in place for next year, these kids won't take Connect again until next spring. So we'll see that impact happen in another year. We are right now working with a lot of support for our school systems around the implementation. What does this mean? How do we prepare for any students who qualified previously under that criteria that aren't going to qualify anymore? And what supports are in place? How do we still make sure that these students are supported and have a successful journey? All of our high school students are grandfathered in. They can still get the LEAP Connect alternate diploma based on the old criteria. So we now know we have enough time and we have plans in place that anybody going into high school that we have time to get them now using April Dunn criteria, we can also get them a diploma as well. So making sure our school systems are thinking about this, identifying students that we gotta have a plan for. What do those supports look like in school next year for those students who don't qualify anymore? So that will go into effect for next school year. The next revision was April. That was our 1508 revision, which is Bulletin 1508. Those are our child find procedures for our state. Those are our evaluations. We call it our pupil appraisal handbook. We've worked for the past year on these revisions. There was no need to rush those. They were not in response to legislation. It was just a bulletin that hadn't been updated in a long time, hadn't had a great review. So we worked across this school year to do this, worked with a lot of stakeholders, SEEP endorsed, superintendents endorsed, and then Betsy approved those revisions in April. This was a comprehensive review, accomplished things, some things that I've heard from this group as well. So I'll kind of talk through some of this. And then it also had some technical edits in it. A couple of main things that it did, we updated the definition of response to intervention and kind of aligned it to what we know about best instructional practice around intervention. So we updated that definition. We also added a lot of clarity that except for those IDEA required exceptionalities where intervention is required, that intervention can't be used to delay an evaluation when you suspect a disability. And that's something that we've heard a lot from parents in our state. We got that taken care of in this revision. We also added to pupil appraisal teams, the addition of licensed psychologists, I'm gonna mess this up, licensed psychologists with school specialty and licensed, there were two different ones, licensed psychologist with a school specialty or a licensed specialist in school psychology. So there are lots of different titles sometimes for psychologists. And so our previous bulletin really limited and said you had to be a certified school psychologist, but there are these other licensed psychologists that can help in our school system, give assessments, and do observations for students, conduct assessments is the big one. And so it allows our pupil appraisal teams to expand their capacity to complete evaluations faster because they're going to have a bit more capacity to do that. We did the same thing with speech language pathology assistants, adding in that those because those individuals are also licensed by a board. They can now help speech language pathologists with any assessments, any screening. And so again, the idea here is to expand the capacity of our pupil appraisal teams, which will in turn help them function more efficiently and faster, because we don't want is delayed evaluations, right? And we know that some of these related service providers now are some of the hardest people to find. So I think that's going to help us in terms of evaluations running a lot more efficiently as well. We updated the autism criteria, aligned that more to current diagnostic and statistical manuals. We worked really, really hard with school psychologists, a large number of those, to get that criteria where we wanted it. We also changed some language, Ms. Webb, I think you will appreciate this, around, so prior to this update, parents were only allowed to bring in prescriptions, doctor's notes from surrounding state doctors. So we would only recognize doctors' prescriptions that were right around the state of Louisiana. This update opened that up and said, you know, parent coming in from California with diagnoses, prescriptions, medical information, that our pupil appraisal teams will now accept that. And I think that's going to be huge, and take that burden off, right? So we had school systems having to tell parents who were coming in and saying, hey, no, I need you to go pay another copay and go to a local or closer doctor to get the information that we need as a school system to proceed. And so I think that will help. Again, it will move evaluations faster. We're not waiting on additional medical information as well. Those were some of the big ones in 1508. Again, if you go look for these updates, it's not yet posted because it's still on notice of intent, but it will update on our website sometime this summer. And then again, these additions will be in effect for next school year as well. And those were kind of the biggest things that I wanted to update you all and just keep posted on the policy changes that were happening. I don't have anything else coming on the horizon until we know what happens at legislative session and anything more that we need to do for the policy. I'm gonna stop there, answer any questions, and then I know we'll talk about a little bit more problems related stuff in the legislative.
Thank you. May I ask specifically about the verbiage used in 1508? Are you saying doctor's notes or doctor's diagnosis? Because those are two very different things.
My computer just died, but I'll get back to you.
Because if it
Yeah.
says doctor's note, I would love that to be changed to doctor's diagnosis, because a doctor's note is what a kid gets from the doctor when they're sick.
Yeah.
And it just excuses an absence.
It's
A doctor's
it's a
diagnosis,
Prescription, yeah.
a doctor's diagnosis is far more formal and more important, and
Yes.
it declares someone has this, like,
Yeah.
it's very definite. Whereas a doctor's note, it can be something like, please let so-and-so use the elevator, they're on crutches.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'll let you know.
thank you.
And it covered prescriptions too. But yeah, I'll get you the specifics.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Meredith? Yes, Mr. Meredith?
So, can you elaborate on the referral for assessment? So how do the students get referred for assessment?
So a parent can request evaluation, a teacher, it could be part of a school building level committee process where concerns have been raised, but they're not really sure which disability or what the concern is. Could be academic, could be behavior. So really, anybody can refer or request an evaluation for. The most common ways we see are teachers, school personnel, and of course, parents.
So once that request is made, then there is an official, follow-up, or it's just like, okay.
There is an official follow-up. That is something that we fixed in policy, last year. We updated it prior to, an IDEA just says that within a reasonable amount of time, the school system has to respond to that request. But then our state went further and defined that time. And it's about 2 weeks. The school has to respond to that request with either, yes, we're going to evaluate, and by the way, I need your consent. And then there's some documents that happen that then help that process proceed. Or the school system could say, no, I'm not going to evaluate, but they have to give the parent a reason why, and they have to offer them due process to be able to go to the next level, to keep moving at the parents too. But there has to be a definitive answer.
So those, no, we are not going to test. Are there some criteria defined to these, well, not teachers, but principals? Well, do we tell them if it is A, B, and C, you must test? Because what's the harm in testing?
So there are some required screenings that every child, but then for assessment for an evaluation for special education, that's where 1508 outlines all those criteria for all 13 disability categories. They know exactly what they're looking for, what assessments have to be given. Yeah.
And the addition of speech language pathologist, that's a new one, or?
So the addition of speech language pathologist assistants is new. And so those assistants can now work with or under the supervision of a speech pathologist to give assessments, provide some interventions, because they're also licensed. And it's just going to kind of open up the capacity. And frankly, we'll likely see students get more speech minutes, right? So the more we build the capacity and find more people who can help in these processes and open some of those permissions for our school systems to utilize these additional licensed people, we'll get more students who can have better services and more minutes.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Meredith. Now it's Ebony's turn with some legislative information.
Okay, I think that Meredith is gonna give some information on a couple of bills as well, but I'm gonna discuss House Bill 237. It was included in your packets today. I'm just gonna provide a little bit of background information, and then I'll tell you guys about the bill. And if anybody has any questions, Brenton will be able to answer. So back in December, the legislative auditor released their third special education. This time the audit was specific to seclusion, restraint, and abuse and mistreatment of students with disabilities in public schools. Now, for years, we've been hearing from families and advocates about the issues in school systems. And the audit kind of highlighted many of those concerns. And so some of them were, there isn't enough monitoring going on as it relates to seclusion and restraint practices and policies in school systems. The use of seclusion and restraint is underreported. And then there's no accountability for school personnel when it comes to improper use of seclusion and restraint. So the auditor in their report, they shared some of those same concerns and observations as our advocates and listed many recommendations to help fix that system. So one of the recommendations was to develop a process to monitor school systems' use of restraint and seclusion. Unfortunately, the Louisiana Department of Education doesn't have the legislative authority to monitor. But the auditor sort of made it clear in the audit report, and the council tends to agree that the law doesn't prevent the Louisiana Department of Education from monitoring. The auditor also reviewed 15 policies at random and found that 46 of those 50, which is about 92%, were not in compliance with the law. So some of the suggestions from the auditor's report were, there needs to be improved processes to verify accuracy of the incidences of restraint. 72% of the schools that they reviewed reported no incidences. Now we've heard from parents that they know their school has used restraint on their child, but then their report shows zero restraints on their audit listings. So we need to improve those processes, but also ensure that school systems are aware of the mandated reporting laws. A large number of the school personnel that the auditor interviewed stated that they will report directly to school administration and not law enforcement or protective services. And then lastly, one of the suggestions was reviewing camera policies to ensure that the school districts are in compliance. In about 60% of the schools that have received the funding to install the cameras, they have not installed the cameras. Now, I think some of that has to do with the policies. They may either be confusing and parents may not know that they have a right to request a camera. And then some of the policies might not have the information or just may be confusing about how you go about requesting the cameras to get them installed in the classrooms. So the DD Council partnered with the ARC of Louisiana, Disability Rights of Louisiana, and the Department of Education. Thank you, Meredith, for sitting in on it. And we had two other policy people from the Louisiana Department of Education that helped work with us on this particular bill. And we even brought in the Families Help and Family Centers and LaCan to help advocate for improved seclusion and restraint practices. We helped draft the bill. It's HB 237, like I said, and we're gonna watch it as it makes its way through the legislative process. Now, I'll just be honest with you guys, it's not a solve all the problems bill, but it is like a start to help us address some of those concerns that not only the auditor had, but a lot of our advocates and our parents have with the use of seclusion and restraint in our schools. So as the bill is written right now, and I'm gonna kind of talk about some changes that we're kind of working with the charter schools and the Louisiana Department of Education, some amendments on later. But as the bill is written right now, if it were to pass, it will remove the use of seclusion in the law. So the use of seclusion would totally be eliminated. And we're using evidence-based, practices that there's no evidence that shows that seclusion is an effective practice. But there's lots of evidence that shows seclusion can be harmful as a punishment. The bill in its current posture also better defines physical restraint, what it is, and specifically how physical restraint can only be done by a specialized team of school personnel unless it's an emergency. So it kind of specifies that and better defines physical restraint. It also clarifies that during and after the use of restraint, the student has to be monitored at all times. And the monitoring has to be documented in an incident report. Additionally, a school nurse or a school health designee that the school nurse appoints must see the student who's been restrained as soon as possible, or at least before the day is over, that school day is over. And this just helps get another set of eyes on that student, to observe for any injuries that may have occurred during the physical restraint. And then, those individuals are mandated reporters. So, if there was any misuse of the physical restraint, they're mandated to report that. Also, in the bill, the parents have to be notified the same day of the incident. It also expands what information has to be included in the incident report. And the more information you have just helps us capture the event, what occurred, who's involved, what type of restraints were used, and all of that. So it's very specific information in the bill. And again, you guys have it. You can go and read those specific things that have to be captured in the incident report. It also requires a video, if it's available, to be reviewed and just to ensure compliance with policy and procedures. The bill also reduces the amount of incidents in a year from 5 incidents to 3 incidents before you trigger a behavior intervention plan review. It requires districts to post policies and procedures publicly at the start of the year. And it also requires the Louisiana Department of Education to review policies annually and provide feedback on compliance with the law. Now, like I said, there may be some amendments, and I think that may be one of the things that might be amended. Is that LDOE, I think, once they review a policy, it may not be annually, once they give feedback, which is what we're hoping for, or Meredith, you can talk and speak to that once I'm done. Just providing feedback just to make sure that those policies are in compliance with the law. It may be a one-time thing instead of just annual. But in its current posture right now, the department would review those policies annually. Also, it requires the department to post publicly data on restraints and update that data on their website quarterly. Just so advocates can make sure that they're holding their districts accountable with the information that's being provided. We don't want to see zero incidents in their audits when parents have reported that their child has been restrained. It also gives the department permission to create a crisis intervention training program with those IDEA funds. In its current posture, again, it will require the first-year employees, first-year teachers or peers to take the crisis intervention training, and that specialized crisis team has to repeat that training annually. And then lastly, it requires the installation of cameras in all self-contained special education classrooms without the need for parental request. So all of the districts were allocated funding to install the cameras. Unfortunately, I want to say, like I said earlier, only about 40% have installed those cameras. So they have the funding. So this bill in its current posture would require all self-contained special education classrooms to install those cameras without that parental request. And like I said, we have been working with, the Charter School Association and the Louisiana Department of Education on some amendments. We're looking at where we can agree and, you know, we're gonna look at working where we can agree. We're scheduled to meet on Friday to discuss all of the, changes that they would like to see. But we're gonna negotiate where we can. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But I know one of the things that they want to see added back is seclusion. And, I'm not sure we're gonna agree on that, but like I said, we'll meet on Friday and there'll probably be some amendments, when this bill is heard. I think it may be heard on May 7th in the House Education Committee. But we'll make sure you guys update. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Meredith.
I'll just say, I was just really impressed with how you all came together, disability rights, and just, and the ARC, and just how everybody really came together to try to do the best to solve the problem, right? And I really appreciate that, as a department, and I'm really hopeful for where it's gonna go. And so just really impressed with you guys and really coming together around this. I'll just kind of, you know, if there are any specific information, questions around, any of it or how any of this currently works right now, one of the challenges is understanding the definitions that are involved. And I think that's something that has been, clarity tried to be brought as well to what is seclusion, what is seclusion rooms, restraint, what are they not? We already, in the current law, do not allow any mechanical restraints. So that was never, that's always been gone, for several years, probably since the last update of this, 2017, a while back. We haven't had mechanical restraint in Louisiana in a long time. But just the complexities around the different definitions. What is seclusion? What are seclusion rooms? What are they not? And trying to figure out what needs to be included to clarify some of that around seclusion too. But I'm anxious, and of course we'll be there following as well. I know this was something that on Bessie's legislative agenda that they were interested in working toward a solution. So I know we appreciate you guys a lot for that. Do we want to see if there are any questions about this one?
Yeah, do you guys have any questions about HB 237?
I haven't read, oh, I'm sorry.
It's on my life. Would you like to speak?
Sure, I keep my It's, I mean, you know, at these schools, you know, well, actually, I should be asking a question. Are there anything in there that speak to accountability for those principals? Because they are responsible, they are the one in charge, you know, of those schools on a daily basis.
So I think the increased details to the reporting and making sure that, that we get the information quarterly, that the Department of Education posts the information on their website quarterly, that is going to increase the accountability of school systems. Like I said, if a parent knows that their child has been restrained, and they see 0 incidents on that particular school system's report, they need to hold that school system accountable. I think, and I don't know if we didn't put anything in the bill about like reporting that information to the Department of Education, saying that, hey, I know they reported 0, but there was an incident. And I think just making sure that we put specifics about, okay, if there is an incident, the parent has to be notified in an incident report. at least by the end of the school day, I think, right, Richard? The parent has to be notified by the end of the school day, and there has to be an incident report given to that parent by, within 24 hours. So if a parent knows that they've been given an incident report and then they look on the quarterly report that that school system is turning in and they have 0 incidents, then that is holding them accountable. Like, you guys reported 0, but I have an incident report that's saying that you restrained my child. So we tried to put accountability in there, and then we do have, you wanna add something? Yes, go ahead.
I didn't know if you were gonna add that part, but it was just something I was thinking of. So part of the whole issue that was talked about in the audit was that the department itself may not have the resources for the monitoring that we would like to see, whether that's staff, funding, whatever it may be. And so we did put, again, this is kind of baby steps in addressing everything in that audit. We did put in there, and I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it, but we wanted a lot of this information to go to, we call them the CX, the Special Education Advisory Council that each district has, because they are the ones that can start having those discussions within their districts and start holding folks accountable based on whatever this data is. So if there are issues within a certain school system, because there's still a lot of control when it comes to school systems, getting it in the hands of those advisory councils or committees that can then hold those districts accountable for questionable data or questionable practices. So that, I mean, but no, there's nothing that specifically says the principal will do this or have it do other in this particular legislation.
Does that answer your question?
And then also making sure things are done correctly. We have that crisis intervention training with a specialized team, like making sure that each school has a specialized team that are going to respond to these situations, as opposed to whoever's walking by the classroom is the person that's responding. Another level of, in a way, accountability, because you know someone that has been trained on the proper techniques and procedures and what is right, what is wrong, what is safe, can be the person that would be addressing these particular situations. And so, you know, we thought that was a level of oversight. And a lot of it was trying to figure out ways to make schools accountable within themselves. We have a component in there about seeing the nurse or some sort of health designee. So we get another set of eyes on the student that was involved in restraint, not just was there abuse, but also, I mean, you don't know what happens to someone during these situations. Any sort of improper procedures, it might result in something we don't know. So getting another set of eyes, that's another mandated reporter that has to see them. That's probably someone that is also going to contribute to some sort of reports. So you as a parent, if you're concerned about something that's happened, you may, through various processes or complaints, have access to or have other reports to look at to see what happened. So I think these things will maybe start moving in the right direction for that accountability that you're talking about, but I don't know that it's going to address it immediately. But I think it's setting things up to get to that point.
Because most often the parents don't know. So that same quarterly report that will be going up to the state, can that quarterly report also go home, right, to the family, so they can see 0 reporting, but I have a, you know, a restraining on my child, so the parent can have the information in their hand right away, right, instead of waiting. I guess they can go and ask questions instead of waiting for the state to act. So,
you know, that report, I would imagine a pretty hefty report. But I think we as advocacy groups do better communicating with LGOE when that report goes out. It's not just slid on the website and we don't know about it. We can know about it, exactly. Push it out, make people aware, hey, go look at this. That was something that all of the advocacy groups that are participating in this could maybe work with the department in getting that heads up, so we'll know where it's at, where to find it, push information out so everyone can access it that way.
I'm done. Okay.
Any other questions? Martin?
It's not a question, just a statement, but because this is going out in committee next week, it was supposed to be this week, it's going out next week. There is an active action alert. So you can go on our website, laddc.org. If you go under the LCAN section, our alerts are there. We also email it out. It's on Facebook as well. And I think X, we still put stuff on there, for the 2 people that actually look at it on X. But it has a lot of information in there, just for our alert, who you can contact. We give you all the committee members. It's on House Education. Again, our alerts aren't gonna tell you yay or nay on HB 237, but it's just an opportunity for you to look at it. You may not agree with the draft that's there, just share your thoughts. Ebony talked to you about amendments that are gonna happen. I'm sure there's gonna be amendments throughout the whole process until it's signed by the governor, hopefully. And hopefully it's signed in a manner that we are in support of. But it's gonna constantly be updated, because we're gonna constantly hear from other people. We talked about the groups, us, the ARC, Disability Rights Louisiana, that kind of got to the table with DOE in the beginning to start this. But as now it's out publicly, other groups are coming in, hey, we don't like this, or we do like this, and we're trying to figure out where we can agree. But I will say, we're pretty stern in what we want, and we'll just see where it takes us. But even with some of the stuff that we were looking at, there was some good feedback that came from the charter schools of things we were like, yeah, we need that in there. So discussion is always great, you know, when we partner with all these groups, we're gonna get some good out of any discussions that we have. So look for those. You probably won't see any sort of amendments until it actually goes to committee. Those will be presented during the process, the hearing.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or anything to add? Okay, cool.
Nothing.
You can say something.
Oh, no, I just love your young spirit. You're like, okay, cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now moving on to contractual updates. Stephanie, would you like to do that?
Sure, I'm talking about the transition to adulthood, activity 3.1.5. The council partnered with Team Dynamics to offer a series of trainings on transition to adulthood for individuals with intellectual and developmental disability. So we sent an LADC news that Team Dynamics created a survey. I want to say this was in maybe January, I don't recall. To identify skills, knowledge, and resources that can best empower individuals. Team Dynamics then took those responses from all over the state to help determine which topics they were going to do the trainings and at which locations. So there are 6 statewide trainings. The topics that were selected were health and well-being, enhanced financial literacy, preparing for employment, civic engagement, and navigating waivers. So each of those trainings has been scheduled. Every training consists of 2 different sessions, so 2 of those topics are being covered. And there are 6 locations that the trainings will be. And those were just the most prominent places that had survey results, or people had answered. So the first training was in Lake Charles on March 27th. They had 18 people registered to attend. I did include in your packet this little document. It includes just the dates of all of the trainings, the upcoming one, what the sessions are gonna be, and then how many people actually attended. So even though they had 18 people that had registered, they had 6 people that attended the Lake Charles training, and I did get the evaluations and survey results from those already, but I have not to really look into them, but it was overall good. They did have a training in Baton Rouge on April 24th. I'm gonna talk about that more at the next meeting, just because it goes into that quarter. But if you were interested in the training, the next one is May 29th, and that's gonna be in Lafayette. And there will be a couple more coming up, so, those LADDC news reminders for those trainings will be going out soon, so. Are there any questions for me about this program? Okay. It was fun when I went to.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hearing no additional questions, we will move on to announcements. Tomorrow is the full council meeting, which will begin at 10 a.m. in this room. Please note the adjusted schedule for council meetings due to the location. Does anyone on the committee have any announcements to make? Evan?
I'm not on the committee, but I wanted to circle back just real quick since we have some extra time. Meredith, did you have any other legislative updates about what the department is sort of following?
The other one that I know this group might be interested in, Britton, I don't remember the number off the top of my head. But it's the one that talks about a lot of legislative reports of the department and
589,
589.
the House Bill 589.
And just to kind of clarify, so we do a lot of legislative reporting, in terms of generating reports and sending them across the street to the legislature. We also send anything that we send to the legislature to Bessie as well. And I want to be really clear. So that bill in its current stance requires every 2 years, the legislature to say whether or not they still want all of those reports. You all know they take a lot of time, a lot of staff energy, resources. But I want to be clear that we are still collecting all of, so the big reports that I take care of, right, are the dyslexia reporting that's required. There's a SPED compliance report that I do and send across the street. Oh, there's one more. I'll think of it in a second. But all of that data we will still have, and it's still public. So anything that you want, that the legislature tells us, no, I don't want that report anymore. We don't want it to come to us. We don't want to read it anymore. We still have it. I'm still collecting all federal required data. We do a lot of reporting, federally and state publicly that we're required to. But that particular bill is going to require the legislature every 2 years to make a decision about those legislative reports. And what happens is it doesn't allow for a law to be created and require a legislative report that then just we're required to do. They're gonna make the legislature tell every 2 years which reports and revisit them. Do you still want them or not? So they could sunset, they could, yes, we still want this one. But I want to just clarify, because we've had a couple of questions about that I'm still gonna have the data, still gonna collect it. So if you're worried about, for example, I don't send the SEEK reports to the legislature. That's something I have to, I think the law says, I know I have to send it to my state panel. So like I'm still collecting all of that. If there's anything you're worried about that you have a question about and you say, Meredith, I want to know, I want to make sure you're still going to collect this and give it to us if we want to see it or stakeholders want to see it. I can answer any questions about that.
Stephanie?
I do. I just had a quick question okay, it requires them every 2 years. So if they say like, no, we you know what, we don't want this, I'm just pulling one out of the air, just dyslexia
Yeah,
report.
it's like, thank you, that's what I want to do. Yeah.
No, you named it.
I mean, not.
I don't know. Like if they just happen to say one year, like, no, we don't need this dyslexia report, whatever.
Seclusion and restraint, seclusion and restraint.
Yeah.
If in the next time this, or they have to make this decision, so I guess 2 years later, can they decide, you know what, we want this report, we changed our mind, this is becoming an issue, we're seeing it now. But like, if it's, once it's, I guess my question is, if they say that they no longer want this, is it like, okay, it's done, we're not doing it? I know you're saying you're gonna have.
That's a great question,
Okay.
Stephanie, that I have not thought about. I'll find out.
Okay,
They would have to reinstate it and it would, so like there would be a bill that would reinstate that report, I would think, and tell us to, and it would go back into place and we would have to do it again. So next year, there will be a bill following, if this goes through, there will be a bill next year that will indicate which ones they do and don't want. So we're gonna do a whole nother round of all of them just to make sure before next year. So like my reporting this year is staying the same in terms of legislative reports, just because I don't want us to get to next year and them say, oh, we do one, and we didn't do one, or we don't have one. So everything's kind of staying the same for us this year. We'll do a whole nother year. And then next year, it's my understanding there will be a follow-up bill to this point next year to say which ones they do and don't want next year. So, but for example, so the seclusion and restraint one, which I can't speak for them, I'd say that. If the legislature were to say, I don't want the seclusion and restraint one anymore, the law still requires us to collect all of that data, post it on our website, so it's all still there. We just wouldn't then turn it over to the legislature as well. So I wanted y'all to be clear that we're still collecting. Good question.
Brenda?
That was, well, part of my clarity was, and we kind of did at the end there, so it's reports that the legislature said we want. And now it's just up to them if they decide to keep it or not. The other question I had was, so let's say this year a bill passes, we want this report about X, Y, and Z. So we know it's gonna sunset in 2 years if this law has passed, that's the way it is. What is that process if is it just gonna automatically sunset, or is there a trigger, like the department goes to the legislature and says, hey, you've been wanting this report, do you still want it, how do they know that
Yeah,
it's about to end? Especially when you look at like, the new legislators coming in and they get it this year, they may not be familiar that this
Yeah.
the only year they're gonna see it, they might want it. Like, what's that triggering process to?
I suspect they're gonna lean a lot so we have major tracking of legislative reports because we are not into not doing something or not turning them in on time to our state government and stakeholders. So we have serious tracking of what's required, when it's due. And by the way, they all go at different times. It's not like we do all our reports, send them, they can all have different timelines on them. So we have major tracking. I would assume they would also lean heavily on us each year to say, okay, which ones do we need to address this year? Which ones are coming up to sunset as 2 years in this year? And so I would suspect we're working very closely with them on this tracking timelines too.
And does it impact any staffing? I know Dr. Brumley said there's, I don't know, 6 or 7 people that's their job, just to do all these reports for the legislature. Would it impact those positions, or are they just gonna be used to continue doing reports and data that y'all normally collect and make available publicly?
Good question, I don't know that I have an answer to that, but it's a great question. I know I do about 3, just on our team, but I do know our policy team does a lot of those too. And once we finalize and complete them, they do a lot of the review for us. And then I don't communicate with any legislators and their team sends them
probably because of all that tracking and making sure we're sending them over. So they're kind of all funneled through our policy team and then they send them over to the legislature. But I'm not sure how that would impact staffing, but I like
Just asking, because free them up and the money is there for them to
Right.
still work there, there's some monitoring things that, you know, we don't have the staffing for, so we might have freed up some time for folks.
Yep.
To move over to other.
Picking up what you're reading.
If Dr. Bush is listening.
I feel a little concerned because that means they can just go, we don't want to hear any of this and just ignore our population, which isn't very good. Is there any loopholes?
Well, the only thing that I would say is a lot of this stuff, so even there's a legislative report that we do that's called a SPED compliance report. All of that data I already have, it's already public, so it's always gonna be somewhere else, and I can kind of, depend on how this bill falls out, I can kind of crosswalk that with y'all and tell you in any of those legislative reports, if you're looking at them, you wanna see, okay, Meredith, they said they don't want that one anymore, but where would I still get that? I can kind of crosswalk that for y'all and tell you where it is still reported.
Can y'all still report it to them even if they say they don't want it? Cause I mean, they still need to see it.
I mean, I know like Dr. Brumley, when he goes every legislative session and does his presentations, there's certainly information that he shares. But I don't know, maybe that's a good question. I doubt if they tell us they don't want it. I don't know that it would be simple, but we certainly still have it and it would still be public information, sure, that we can share.
Yeah, but it all needs to start ignoring us.
We can share it. We can share it in our avenues. Right?
Can we pester them?
Could. That's kind of the only other one though, that I wanted to just kind of clarify and make sure people just kind of know what our intentions is still gonna. Other requirements we still have to collect some.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they want to say? Or ask? Ebony?
I just want to make sure I announce in this committee as well, that the Lieutenant Governor, Billy Nungesser, will be here tomorrow to address the council at 10 a.m. And so this is a great opportunity to present any issues or concerns that you all have within the disability community, to someone that's higher up in our state government. I think he's shown that he cares. He's gonna be presenting tomorrow on some of his initiatives that he's doing within the disability community. And I think it's a great opportunity for our stakeholders and our council members just to address some of the concerns that we are seeing federally and in our state that could trickle down from the federal things that we're seeing. Because I think he's definitely willing to listen and potentially advocate on our behalf. So just wanted to kind of mention that again in this committee as well, that he'll be here tomorrow. Thank you.
Just want to ask again to be sure. Does anyone have anything they miss? Any public comment at all? No. Hearing no additional questions.
Tony has his name right.
Oh, Tony.
Just wanted to, if we were ending, I was just raising my hand that we could pass.
Okay. So would someone like to, oh. Yeah, we can just adjourn if no one like disagrees. Okay. Okay, cool. I adjourned the meeting at 5:49.
Thank you, everybody.
Tomorrow, everyone.